Under a brilliant moonlit night, a sleek black car cut through the darkness of a coastal road. A man in a sharp suit stepped out, his presence casting a long shadow on the desolate path. With long silver hair flowing, he emerged from his vehicle as evil itself began to awaken. In a dimly lit warehouse, two men warmed themselves by a fire, discussing a new shipment of illegal drugs. The substance was called psychedelic moon, a strange form of payment from their smugglers. Their conversation was cut short by the sudden appearance of the silver-haired man. One of the men, bewildered, demanded to know where the stranger had come from. As the gangster asked for an invitation, the stranger pressed the barrel of a large handgun to his forehead. In a flash of light and a spray of blood, the gangster's body collapsed onto the wet ground, his partner looking on in stunned silence. The silver-haired man coolly held up his smoking gun, presenting it as his entry pass. The scene shifted to a vibrant nightclub, where a DJ anxiously worked her mixing board. The club, however, was not filled with dancers but with bodies strewn around a table. A man with glowing red eyes and a demonic grin surveyed the carnage. He was a vampire, and he bared a horrifying set of fangs. The DJ flinched in terror. The vampire leader complained that she was killing the vibe and demanded more exciting music. His men dragged another victim away as he insisted she just needed to blast something loud. To these creatures, humans were merely prey. He took a step forward, his imposing figure looming over the DJ booth. He grabbed her, telling her that if she couldn't even manage a simple task, he had no reason to hold back his hunger. But just as he leaned in, a door was kicked off its hinges. The vampire paused, annoyed by the interruption. For even creatures like them, there were beings they feared. The sound of bodies hitting the floor echoed through the room, their faces contorted in shock. The silver-haired man stood silhouetted in the doorway, casually asking the fanged creatures if they had enjoyed their fun. They were known as vampire hunters. One of the vampires aggressively demanded to know who the intruder was. The hunter, looking almost bored, expressed his pity for them. He understood their leader, Jokyo, was desperate to find traces of his parent, but to see the once mighty Jokyo clan plotting with third-rate gangsters was a pathetic sight. He mused aloud what the late Jokyo would say, wondering if he would burst into tears he couldn't possibly shed. The vampire leader's eyes narrowed in recognition, realizing who he was facing. He identified the hunter as Sylvester, the long silver-haired priest expelled from the Vatican. Enraged, the leader declared he would decorate the night with the hunter's blood, and his minions charged forward. Sylvester dryly commented that their customer service was totally lacking. He then insultingly asked if it was because they had no parents. He began to recite a grim prayer about creation and the making of Eve from Adam's bone. He declared that death was a holy ceremony, and with a flurry of motion, sent them back to Eden. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Facing the leader, Sylvester stated he doubted he'd get any useful information. He explained that the very idea of trying to kill him made the vampire the most useless mongrel of them all. The vampire screamed for him to shut up. The vampire's arm mutated into a monstrous limb as he swung at the hunter. Sylvester noted with mild interest that this one could mutate. The vampire attacked again with his massive claws. In response, Sylvester raised his handgun and fired a single powerful shot. His eyes were cold and focused as the bullet found its mark. He followed up with a swift kick that sent the creature flying, a pained grunt escaping the vampire's lips. The impact shattered the floorboards, leaving the leader in a heap of splintered wood. Sylvester casually asked if he could hold back a little. Nearby, another man was kneeling over a body collecting blood. This was Jong Jun, another hunter, who complained that Sylvester's methods left little to collect. Sylvester asked where Diokayan was, but Jong Jun informed him that he was the substitute for the day. He confirmed that the Jokyo clan was indeed connected to the Songdong gang, remarking that the hideout was an excellent spawning sanctuary. The downed vampire began to stir, his red eyes snapping open. Zhang Jun urged Sylvester to finish his work. Sylvester raised his gun without a word as the vampire charged one last time. The hunter looked down the barrel, unleashing a hail of bullets that tore through the vampire's body. The creature's eyes widened in disbelief. Silence fell over the warehouse once more, the only sound being the vampire smashing into the ground outside. The creature scrambled to his feet and fled into the darkness. Zhang Jun noted that he left in quite a hurry. Sylvester tasked him with the cleanup, but Zhang Jun questioned the need, figuring the vampire would die from his injuries anyway. Sylvester's gaze turned sharp. He warned Zhang Jun that if he babbled like that again, he would be the one to die by his hand. Zhang Jun, taken aback, called it a violent joke, but seeing Sylvester's expression, he quickly gave a thumbs up and promised to handle the cleanup. As Zhang Jun went about his work, Sylvester sighed, admitting to himself that things were getting complicated. The vampire had already gone feral, his awakened form in progress. The full weight of that realization settled upon him. Far away, a bright light flared as a gang of bikers tearing down the highway. A police car gave chase, sirens blaring, but a woman on the back of one of the bikes just laughed and flipped them off. In the chaos, another rider accelerated. a lone figure destined to become a sacrifice under the falling moonlight. He never had many worries in his life. He came from a happy home with a loving family, a businessman father, a housewife mother, a model student for an older brother, and even a golden retriever named Jean d'Arc. A flash of light brought his thoughts back to the present, a high-speed chase through the city streets. Compared to his perfect family, he felt aimless, with no real ambitions or academic talent. This sense of emptiness fueled a constant desire to escape his normal, day-to-day life. A woman on the back of his friend's bike yelled that their pursuer was still on their tail, asking how they were going to lose him. She panicked, reminding her boyfriend, Zhang Yongjin, that she had flipped the guy off and cursed him out, proving that her mouth wrote checks her bike couldn't cash. He just told her to sit still. The lone rider pursuing them remained silent, gaining steadily. The young man realized they couldn't shake him because they were sticking to the predictable path. Suddenly, he broke from the pack, veering off the main road. His friend shouted after him, asking what he was doing. He revved his engine and launched his bike over a guardrail, a move that left his friend stunned. For a moment, he was airborne, a brief, silent flight through the night. He landed hard on the street below, the impact jarring him as he sped away. He came to a stop, his friend's angry shouts accusing him of running away by himself. He wiped his visor, ignoring them as he gunned the engine again. At that moment, riding was his only deviation, the only way to escape his routine soaked life. He finally arrived home, dusting himself off after parking his bike. He noted how quiet his dog Jean d'Arc was, wondering if everyone was already asleep. He opened the door to announce he was back but was immediately hit by a foul stench. He froze, his foot landing in a sticky, wet puddle on the floor. It was blood. The lights were off and the smell of rotting fish hung heavy in the air. A cold dread washed over him as he realized someone had broken into his home. He grabbed the nearest thing he could find as a weapon, a decorative sword, and called out for his family. He desperately asked if anyone was there, just as a dark shape lunged from the shadows. He cried out the name of his dog, Jean d'Arc, but the creature that pinned him was a twisted, monstrous version of his beloved pet. He grunted in pain, managing to kick the beast off him. He scrambled back, trembling, unable to believe that the monster before him was really his dog. The creature lunged again, and in a blind panic, he swung the sword. The blade connected with a sickening thud, and blood erupted from the wound. He stared in horror, unable to accept that he had just killed the dog he had grown up with. The sword slipped from his grasp, and his eyes fell upon the mutilated bodies of his parents lying nearby. He retched, the horror of the scene overwhelming him. He crawled toward them, tears streaming down his face, wondering what could have happened. He knelt beside their bodies, sobbing. Then he heard it, a noise from the second floor. The killer was still inside. He knew the sword wouldn't be enough. He remembered his father's hunting rifle in the library and knew he had to get it. He found the library in shambles, with his older brother's body slumped against the bookshelf. His brother had been taken out too. He knelt by his brother's side, his body shaking with grief. He apologized, filled with regret, wishing he had come home sooner. His sorrow turned to cold fury. He picked up the rifle and vowed to kill them all. He noticed the barrel was still warm. His brother must have used it in the fight. He wondered why the killer hadn't taken the gun. He gripped the rifle tighter, his rage building as he swore he would find the person responsible. He knew he should have understood then, as he crept up the blood-stained stairs. But reaching any logical conclusion in that moment was impossible. His eyes widened. He was barefoot, and he raised the rifle, aiming at the top of the stairs. A monstrous hand gripped the doorframe, and a horrifying figure emerged from the shadows. He stared in terror at something that was utterly beyond logic. There are moments in life that leave a person utterly speechless, moments where thoughts freeze and emotions disappear. It's like seeing a favorite celebrity for the first time or hearing a joke so unfunny it creates an awkward silence. It can even happen while witnessing a beautiful sunset over the coast, a sight that simply takes your breath away. And then, there are moments like this. 1. Standing face to face with a nightmare. The creature lunged, and he pulled the trigger. The blast echoed through the house, but the monster barely flinched. The hit sent him stumbling backward, crashing down the stairs. He landed in a heap, the pain in his dislocated shoulder searing through him. He knew he should have run, should have grabbed the rifle and fled. He could have called the police or screamed for help from the neighbors. Logically, there were 100 things he could have done to save himself or get assistance, but in that moment, logic had abandoned him. He didn't know why he acted the way he did. His only thought was the overwhelming need to kill the thing that had destroyed his family. The monster's red eyes locked onto him and it leaped from the top of the stairs, its form a blur of motion. He fired again, screaming a curse at the beast. The second shot found its mark, staggering the creature for a moment. But it was not enough. The monster was on him in an instant, its claws tearing into his flesh. Tendrils shot out from its body, wrapping around him and lifting him off the ground. He was powerless in its grip, his vision blurring as he realized he had failed to avenge them. He thought of his family, his dog, and whispered an apology into the darkness. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and the creature's hand exploded in a shower of gore. It dropped him, stumbling back against the wall. A figure stepped through the shattered doorway. It was the vampire he had fled from earlier, now wounded but still alive. It growled that he had made a fatal mistake. Before the vampire could attack, a volley of shots ripped through the monster's body. The newcomer was Sylvester, the vampire hunter. He stood over the twitching corpse, observing its strange mutations. With a final swift movement, he plunged his sword through the creature's heart, remarking that it should have just died instead of causing such a mess. The young man lay in a pool of blood, watching as the hunter calmly cleaned his blade. Sylvester quoted scripture, stating that no one is righteous, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. He told the boy he could blame him all he wanted, his piercing blue eyes showing no emotion. The blood-soaked rifle lay on the floor nearby. Sylvester knelt down, his sword at the boy's throat, and asked if the gun was his. The boy's vision faded in and out, his strength failing him. The hunter paused, then declared it would be a waste to kill him. The boy's life had been ordinary and without worry, but now it was shattered. He heard a voice calling to him as a police officer knelt by his side, asking if he was okay. The officer shouted for backup, announcing they had a survivor. As consciousness slipped away, the boy whispered the names of his family, his brother, and realized with a horrifying clarity that his wish to escape his ordinary life had come true. A week after the incident, the news was buzzing about the mysterious case that had captivated the public. A news anchor reported on the death of an entire family, with the second son as the sole survivor. His co-anchor clarified that this was the family supposedly attacked by their pet dog. However, the official narrative was being questioned. The production team had information that the survivor was found holding a shotgun, and the fact that he had fired it was drawing significant attention. Public opinion was divided. Some speculated that the survivor, Han Se-gun, might have killed his family out of jealousy over his smarter older brother. Others who knew him from his biking days mentioned that while he wasn't a thug, there was always something that felt off about him. A photographer snapped a picture of Se-gun as he left the police station, his face gaunt and shadowed under a hoodie. He was immediately swarmed by a mob of reporters, their flashes blinding and their questions relentless. They demanded to know why he had killed his family, their voices a chaotic wall of sound. A reporter shoved a microphone in his face, pleading for a comment. The questions triggered a horrific flashback of the monster. A voice echoed in his mind, taunting him, asking if this was what he wanted. It reminded him that while his family was being murdered, he was out riding his bike. The voice questioned his right to be angry. He shook his head, denying it, then broke into a desperate run, shouting that he didn't want any of this. He ran from something he didn't even understand, the events of that night a blur he couldn't or wouldn't fully remember. He didn't want to believe any of it was real. When he finally woke up in the hospital, the monster's body was gone, and the arm that had been severed was somehow intact. It was as if the entire ordeal had been a dream, a nightmare that had never truly happened. He had tried to forget everything, the bodies of his parents, the monster, and the silver-haired man who had saved him. He had no choice but to leave his home, now a crime scene marked by chalk outlines. He knew no one would believe his story, so he wandered the streets, unable to stay locked in the house that held the most painful memories of his life. He found himself in the garage, staring at his motorcycle, his only escape. He felt utterly alone, with nowhere to go, inside or out. He revved the engine and sped off into the night, eventually stopping on a rooftop overlooking the city. He took off his helmet, the sprawling lights below offering no comfort. He looked up at the sky, a sudden realization dawning on him. The man from that night, the hunter, was standing just a few feet away, leaning against a car with an air of casual indifference. Se-gun scrambled to his feet as the man approached, demanding to know if it was him. He pointed an accusing finger, insisting that the hunter had been at his house the day the monster came, his voice rising with a frantic energy. The hunter grabbed him by the collar, telling him to be quiet. He admonished the boy for causing trouble and shouting in the middle of the night. Se-gun, intimidated but still defiant, asked who he was. He then demanded to know what the monster was and if the man was some kind of exorcist. The hunter, unimpressed, challenged him to use his imagination. When the hunter confirmed his guess was close enough, Se-gun nervously asked if the monster was a vampire. The hunter's silence was all the confirmation he needed. The boy was stunned. The hunter decided to get straight to the point. He asked if Se-gun had drunk any of the vampire's blood. The boy recalled the spray of blood when he shot the creature, and fearfully asked if he had turned into a vampire. The hunter admitted it was a possibility. Se-gun then realized his miraculously healed arm must have been a result of the vampire blood, but the hunter corrected him, stating that he was the one who had reattached it. When the boy called it nonsense, the hunter simply asked if anything he had seen that night made sense. Se-gun hesitantly asked if there were many vampires out there. The hunter dismissed the question as none of his business, telling him his only concern should be returning to his normal life. The boy exploded in anger, shouting that a normal life was impossible after losing everything. How could he go back to normal after what he had seen? He lunged at the hunter, who effortlessly caught him by the throat. The hunter's eyes glowed in the darkness as he accused the boy of thinking he was something special. He told him to stop whining, that he wasn't the only unfortunate person in the world. The boy, defeated, asked what he was supposed to do. He pushed the hunter away, yelling that he had watched the monster kill his family and could never forget it. It was impossible. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing that he would get rid of them all, even if it killed him. The hunter watched him. His eyes seemed to glow with a faint light. Under the full moon, he muttered to himself about what an annoying brat the boy was. A small bell chimed as the door to a quiet cafe opened. Inside, Jung sat with a woman at the counter. Sylvester entered, Han Se-gun trailing behind him like a lost puppy. Jung greeted the hunter as Sylvie, earning a sharp reminder not to use that name. The woman at the counter, Sheng Hui, acknowledged Sylvester's arrival and then noticed Se-gun. Jung recognized him as the kid who survived the attack and immediately asked Sylvester about the lead they were tracking. Sylvester informed him that their target had likely left the country. He sank into a chair, frustrated that they had tracked the vampire only to lose him again. Jung, however, was more concerned with Se-gun's presence, asking why Sylvester had brought him along. He pointed out that the boy looked too flimsy to be of any use. Sylvester reminded Jung of his own experiences, stating that fighting monsters was not a task for ordinary humans. He explained to Se-gun that a moment's hesitation against a vampire could result in broken bones and severed muscles. The only way for a human to fight back was to consume a drug called psychedelic moon. It numbed the pain and multiplied a person's strength, but it came at a steep price. The drug, made from vampire blood, slowly destroyed the user's body, leading to a lonely death. Even worse, a slight misstep could turn the user into one of the very monsters they were fighting. With his piercing blue eyes, Sylvester asked if Se-gun still wanted revenge after hearing all that. He warned that stepping into the darkness of the night meant never being able to return to a normal life. Se-gun grabbed the pill from Sylvester's hand, declaring that he already couldn't return. Sylvester stopped him, asking who told him to take it now. Se-gun resisted, and the two engaged in a brief struggle. A burly man with a thick beard and dog tags, Song Deokyeon, entered the cafe, remarking on Se-gun's absurdity and heat. Sylvester, deciding the boy was too much trouble, handed him over to Deokyeon for training, with the simple instruction to keep him from dying, somehow. Deokyeon placed a hand on Se-gun's head, welcoming him to the world of the Mad Moon. Sylvester then instructed Sung Hui to find a boat to Mexico immediately. Se-gun, confused, ran after him as he was leaving, asking if he was going abroad and who was supposed to train him. Sylvester just called the idea of him training the boy ridiculous. He asked Deokyeon if he thought he could make the boy useful, and Deokyeon replied that he would have to try hard. As he left, Sylvester turned back one last time and officially welcomed Han Se-gun to the world of the Mad Moon. 1 year later, outside the lavish Benia Club, a fleet of black sedans pulled up to the curb. A man in a suit opened the door for Chan Yong-hu, the deputy boss of the Sangdong gang. His underlings bowed deeply, welcoming him. Young-hu corrected one of them, reminding him that they were legitimate businessmen now and he should be addressed as Sun Bei. The men nervously agreed. Young-hu asked why he had been summoned, complaining that he had been busy lately. The man hesitantly began to explain. Inside the club, the floor was littered with the unconscious bodies of his men. A lone figure stood in the center of the room, looking down. Young-hu, furious, demanded to know if this was the reason he was called. He berated his subordinate for not managing his territory properly, and the man quickly apologized. Young-hu wondered if the person responsible was the same one who had destroyed their hideout, though he had heard that person was a foreigner. He noted how young the troublemaker looked. The figure blew a bubble with his gum and casually asked if they were done messing around. Young-hu, unimpressed, called the young man a thug and told him to just say what he wanted. He reminded him that they needed to open for business soon. The young man, who was none other than a much-changed Han Se-gun, corrected him, stating he wasn't a thug, but was simply there to collect what he had paid for. Young-hu feigned ignorance, asking what thing he was talking about. Se-gun revealed that his lackeys had taken 5 million won in cash, and as their officer, Young-hu should have known about it, calling them a thuggish organization.
Young-hu's face darkened.
He turned to his subordinate, demanding to know what Se-gun was talking about. The man stammered that he was there for a Dragunov, a Tokarev, and an AK-47. Young-hu scoffed at the idea of getting all that for a mere 5 million won. Se-gun asked if he was feigning ignorance about his gang's activities, specifically their role in distributing Russian and Chinese weapons at inflated prices. Young-hu, having had enough, dismissed him as a little shit and ordered his men to report him to the police. Se-gun, unfazed, wondered aloud if that would be a good idea. He smirked. suggesting he could tell the police that the Shitdong gang had expanded their business from selling knives and guns to also dealing drugs. Cheon Yong-hu, the deputy boss of the Songdong gang, was incandescent with rage. He demanded his men turn the insolent boy into sashimi. Two of his largest enforcers, armed with a bat and a knife, moved to carry out the order. But Han Se-gun was unimpressed. He merely flexed his hand, the veins standing out in stark relief. He moved in a flash, weaving between the clumsy attacks of the two brutes. A single precise blow sent one man reeling, his face shattering from the impact. Se-gun's expression remained as cold as ice. He ducked under a wild swing from the second man and delivered a counter that sent him crashing to the floor. The fight was over in seconds. The gang boss watched in disbelief as his top men lay defeated. Se-gun calmly walked up the stairs, his heavy boots echoing on the polished floor. The boss, now visibly nervous, asked what he wanted. Se-gun listed off a Dragunov, a Tokarev, and an AK-47, stating that he had already paid. Yong-hu stammered that he couldn't produce the weapons on the spot, asking for the details of the deal. Se-gun named the time and place, tomorrow 8 p.m., at the Yoido Hyongshin Securities parking lot, before turning to leave. Once he was gone, Yong-hu cursed him. He slapped a subordinate for a minor breach in etiquette and, seeing no other choice, ordered his man to call in those guys. Meanwhile, at a dusty warehouse on the city's outskirts, the hunter Deokyeon was inspecting a recent delivery of vampire blood. He complained to the dealer that it was all crap, most of it having a vamplic trans rate below 20. Deokyeon noted that it was what he expected from runners associated with the Sungdong gang. The dealer, a wiry old man named Ju, took offense at the suggestion his equipment was faulty. Deokyeon quickly backed down, clarifying he didn't mean it that way. He tossed a bag of cash to old man Ju, who then brought up Jong Jun, asking if Deokyeon had heard from him since his family was killed by vampires. Deokyeon scoffed, dismissing the topic and muttering that his former colleague was probably enjoying himself. With business concluded, he announced his departure. As Deokyeon stepped outside, he paused. Se-gun was just pulling up on his dirt bike. Deokyeon immediately accused him of getting into another fight, a charge Se-gun denied while avoiding eye contact. The boy changed the subject, asking when he could start hunting vampires. Deokyeon called him an idiot, telling him to focus on his training. He warned him against stirring up trouble with shady characters, then relented slightly. Se-gun posed a hypothetical question. If he needed to kill a person, what should he do? Deokyeon's response was blunt. Kill them. He reasoned that the premise itself answered the question. Realizing Se-gun was up to something, Deokyeon grabbed him in a headlock and suggested a sparring session at the gym. A loud cry of protest echoed from the warehouse. That night, under the sterile lights of a city parking garage, a group of gangsters waited by a van. Inside, two newly turned vampires complained about being called out for a single kid. Their leader reminded them to be loyal, but the others scoffed, recalling how their bosses had thrown them under the bus a year prior. It seemed this vampire union was severely lacking in benefits. He was still grumbling about the assignment when a fire extinguisher smashed through the windshield and the entire van erupted in a ball of fire. Se-gun stood amidst the wreckage, the bodies of the other gangsters already littering the ground. Two figures emerged from the smoke, lamenting the loss of their new recruits. With glowing red eyes, the vampires asked if he was done having fun, informing him they couldn't deliver his weapons. Se-gun just smirked, admitting he never thought he'd get them anyway. The vampires looked at him, confused. Astride his bike, sword in hand, Se-gun mused that one couldn't expect much from bullies. He then flashed a predatory grin, his own fangs glinting in the dim light, and suggested that plucking out their canines would make for good business. A memory surfaced from the heat of battle. During a grueling sparring session, Deokyeon had explained that the vampire who killed Se-gun's family was likely tied to the Sungdong gang. The revelation had come between punishing blows, with Deokyeon blocking a fierce counter. Se-gun, sweat stinging his eyes, had questioned how vampires and gangsters could be connected, earning a grunt of approval from his trainer for his improving form. Deokyeon had then asked if he knew why Sylvester was called the true demon hunter.
Se-gun was confused by the sudden tangent.
It was because he had killed the true demon, Jukyo. Se-gun, flexing his aching muscles, pointed out the lack of context. A true demon, Deokyeon explained while trading blows, was a powerful vampire with a vamplic trans rate so high they could walk in daylight. Yukio had led a famous clan called the Jukyo Party. The sparring had been brutal, a flurry of focused strikes and desperate blocks. A heavy kick had sent Se-gun crashing against the cage fence. Catching his breath on the mat, he pieced it together. The remnants of the Jukyo Party had joined the Sangdong gang. Deokyeon offered a hand up, confirming they were seeking traces of their fallen leader, hoping to reclaim his power and their former glory. But as Se-gun took his hand, Deokyeon had used the opportunity to slam him back to the ground. Pinned Se-gun listened as his trainer warned him that even with their reputation diminished, Jukyo's successor was still alive. He had cautioned Seagun not to get ahead of himself, for becoming their target would mean living in hell. Back in the present, hell had arrived. A vampire lunged from the shadows. Seagun swerved on his bike, creating distance in the dark garage. The second vampire, the leader, coolly offered his subordinate some help. The underling snarled that he would handle it himself, telling his boss to stay put. The leader seemed amused by the order, but the subordinate insisted. The vampire charged, but Seagun met him head-on, slicing his arm clean off with his sword. He spun the bike around, dragging the blade across the concrete in a shower of sparks. The creature recognized the pattern of attack, refusing to be treated like an idiot. It lunged again. Seagun's eyes were cold and focused. He swung his sword in a wide arc, catching the vampire across the chest. He landed smoothly, but the vampire, though wounded, boasted that he had predicted the move. It lashed out with its claws, and Seagun raised his sword to block. The blade shattered on impact. Seagun cursed the cheap stainless steel vampire gloated at the sight of the broken weapon, but its words were cut short as Seagun drove the broken blade into its throat. The creature fell to its knees, gurgling a final plea to its leader. The leader simply noted that his subordinate had been told to stay put. Seagun rose, acknowledging the point with a grim smile. He reminded the vampire of the 5 million won he'd paid the gang, pulling the broken hilt from the dead vampire's neck. He needed at least this much to break even. The leader's eyes widened slightly. Seagun asked if he agreed. With a final crushing blow from his reinforced glove, he caved in the dead vampire's skull. The leader remained impassive, his face a mask of contempt as he stood over his subordinate's ruined corpse. Seagun's face was splattered with blood. The vampire mocked his strange glove, asking if it was even from the 21st century, and wondering why he was going to all this trouble, since he must have known they would show up. Seagun held up the broken, bloody sword, telling the vampire exactly what he was after. He told him to shut up and come at him. The vampire scoffed, claiming to have already assessed his style. With his sword broken and his glove revealed, he believed Seagun was desperate, taunting him for it. In response, Seagun dropped into a crouch and raised the Tokarev pistol he had concealed. A single shot echoed through the garage, blowing a hole through the vampire's head. The creature's eyes went wide with shock as his body collapsed. Seagun lowered the smoking gun, his voice a cold whisper in the sudden silence, reminding the corpse of his objective. Its head. With the battle over, Seagun stood over the fallen vampire leader. He used his pistol to draw a blood sample just as the corpse erupted in ethereal blue flames and turned to ash. A sharp pain lanced through his shoulder, where deep claw marks bled freely. He knew he had no choice. With a grimace, he pulled out a syringe and injected its contents directly into the wound. The drug hit him like a freight train, and he collapsed. The garage fell silent, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burnt vampire. Seagun picked himself up and rode his bike out of the concrete tomb. As he emerged into the cool night air, he found Deokyeon waiting for him. His traitor looked him over with a critical eye, asking sarcastically if he felt better now. Seagun demanded to know how he was found, to which Deokyeon dryly explained the modern magic of GPS. Deokyeon then commented that Seagun didn't seem to care for his motorcycle anymore, riding it roughly these days. He reminded the boy that he used to treat it like a priceless treasure. Seagun just told him to mind his own business and sped off into the city streets. Deokyeon watched him go, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. Elsewhere, in a dimly lit office, Cheon Yong-hoo was being dressed down for his failure. He couldn't believe one kid had taken down 6 of his men. The gang's true boss, Jung Sangdong, was practicing his golf swing nearby and offered a scathing, insincere compliment on a job well done. He couldn't believe the kid was a vampire hunter. This failure was a problem, one that had made the entire Sangdong gang look like a joke. When Yong-hoo nervously suggested calling the Jukyo party for help, Sangdong snapped, asking if he wanted to advertise his incompetence to the world. Sangdong demanded to know if the hunter was truly a minor. He then gave a simple, chilling order: find the boy, kill him at all costs, and bring back his head. Later, on a quiet street corner, Seagun sat at a convenience store table as Deokyeon emerged with drinks. His trainer tossed him a can. Seagun brought up their earlier conversation about the Sangdong gang's connection to the Jukyo party. He asked why Deokyeon had let them operate freely, accusing him of being scared of organized crime. When his trainer denied it, Seagun pressed on, asking if it was about money. Deokyeon took a long swig from his can, confirming Seagun knew him well enough. The answer infuriated Seagun, who argued that vampires were an infection that needed to be wiped out. Profit or not, they were a plague that only grew stronger with time. He asked if Deokyeon's cold pragmatism stemmed from never having lost anyone he cared about. Deokyeon finally looked at him, asking if Seagun thought he should be the one to judge who deserves to die. He told him not to be ridiculous. He stated flatly that he wouldn't kill a mosquito for an ideology. He killed only for money. Then, his tone shifted. He asked if Seagun had injected himself with vampire blood, gesturing to the torn jacket. He reminded him that Jukyo blood was notoriously unstable. Deokyeon cursed, regretting the day he ever made a deal with Sylvester. He told Segun to pack his things and leave, refusing to get dragged into a war with the Jukyo party over him. Segun simply agreed and stood to go. As he watched the boy walk away, Deokyeon felt a pang of understanding. Anyone would lose their mind if the ones who killed their family were still out there. He thought of his conversation with Old Man Ju, regretting his callous words about Jung Jun. He called out to Segun, opening the trunk of his car to reveal 2 duffel bags filled with knives and ammunition. He added cynically that Segun would probably be dead before he used all 500 rounds. He warned him to be careful. The gear was expired, Hungarian-made junk that might blow up in his face. You get what you pay for, after all. Segun turned and bowed deeply, thanking his trainer for everything. For a moment, Deokyeon looked pained. He remembered a younger Segun, and the simple advice he'd once given him, don't ever become a vampire. He repeated the warning now, his voice hard as steel, promising to hunt Segun down without mercy if he ever turned. He wouldn't go easy on him just because he'd raised him. Segun listened in silence before starting his bike and roaring off into the night. He rode on alone, thinking that the moon was so beautiful. In a grimy back alley, Cheon Young-hoo approached a group of delinquents warming themselves by a trash fire. He introduced himself as being from Songdong Credit Loans. One of them, a cocky kid with red-tipped hair, asked what he wanted. Young-hoo began to explain that he needed to speak to their leader, but the kid cut him off, sneering that he had no business with an old man. Young-hoo's face hardened. He sighed, wondering why kids these days were so rude, just as the men behind him revealed their glowing red eyes and monstrous fangs. The trash can fire crackled, casting a hellish glow on the scene under the bridge. The young bikers could only watch in horror as one of Cheon Young-hoo's vampires systematically broke their leader's arm. A girl in the group covered her face, unable to watch the brutal display. Young-hoo casually told his man to stop, reminding him that the biker would still need his hands to grip a motorcycle's handlebars. Beaten and broken, the biker leader Young Jin screamed his submission. A smirk touched Young-hoo's lips. He ordered his subordinate to bring the bag of cash from the trunk, calling him an idiot when he hesitated. The bag landed with a thud at Young Jin's feet, a down payment for his services. Young-hoo told him to use the money however he wished, but the objective was clear. Bring him the green-haired high school brat. He grabbed the boy's hair, ensuring the message was received. His vampire enforcer moved to give the boy a taste of what was coming, but Young-hoo held him back, noting they couldn't have their new asset dying before he was useful. As the sky darkened, Young-hoo lit a cigarette, muttering about how his vampire underlings got dumber at night, and wishing that old myths about garlic and crosses were actually true. 4 months later, Segun entered a quaint cafe. A bell chimed his arrival. The woman at the counter initially informed him they were closed, but then recognized him with a smile. She remarked on how much he had grown, and he quipped that it was due to growth hormone shots. She asked how he was handling living alone, and he realized she knew everything. She explained that, as Sylvester's representative in Korea, she received regular reports from Deokyeon. Getting straight to the point, she asked what he needed. Segun inquired about a tool for detecting vampires. She presented a bloodstone pendulum, but warned its effective range was only about 20 meters. He insisted on buying it. She relented but advised him to be more careful with his funds. She offered a crossbow, but he declined, stating he had weapons but not a true one. She correctly guessed that Old Man Ju wouldn't sell him psychedelic moon. Segun figured it was because he was a minor. The situation was tricky, as Ju was the only reliable dealer. Then she had an idea. She pulled a small vial from under the counter, a weak sample of the drug she had left over, and offered it to him. It would be their little secret. He thanked her gratefully, but she reminded him with a grin that her establishment was cash only. The vampire IRS was a real pain. He was momentarily flustered. Later, Segun stood on a rooftop, lost in thought as the sun set. He recalled Sylvester's words from a year ago, the cold welcome to the world of the Mad Moon, a world where bad luck was the norm. He wondered if his mentor would ever return. A voice called his name. It was Yang Jin and his biker gang. They were shocked by his transformation, commenting on his hair and how much he'd changed in a year. A girl in the group asked if he remembered her, but he stared back blankly, asking who she was. Yang Jin laughed at his attitude, but his amusement quickly turned to anger. He faced Segun, demanding to know if he had any idea how much trouble he'd gone through to find him. Segun's eyes glowed faintly as he identified his old acquaintance and asked if he wanted to die. The threat hung in the air, and Yang Jin and his friends flinched back. Around Segun's neck, the bloodstone pendulum began to pulse with a faint red light. He realized Yang Jin was a vampire, somehow active in the daylight, a trait reserved for the most powerful of their kind. He noticed bloodstains on Yang Jin's jacket and understood. The boy was in the process of turning. He asked if they were working for the Sangdong gang. Yang Jin smirked, pleased to be recognized so quickly. Se-gun cut to the chase and asked how much they were being paid. The price was 2 million won for his location and 8 million for his capture. Yang Jin warned him they weren't planning on being gentle. Se-gun thought about how easy it would be to kill them, but there were too many witnesses. He called them pathetic for selling out so cheaply. Enraged, Yang Jin squared up, but Se-gun stopped him. If they wanted to keep their biker pride, they should settle this like bikers, not common thugs. Yang Jin accepted the challenge. The golden hour cast long shadows across the street as the two groups prepared their bikes. The terms were simple: a no-rules cannonball race to the Gyeongin Expressway. As they lined up, Yang Jin remarked that things could have been different if Se-gun wasn't such a jerk, suggesting they could have even shared a beer. Se-gun told him to take a good look at the sunset because it would be the last thing he ever saw. Yang Jin spat back a curse. The referee crushed a can in his hand and dropped it to the pavement. With a thunderous roar, the race began. The race was on, two motorcycles weaving through traffic as the sun bled across the horizon. Yang Jin pulled ahead, laughing and taunting Se-gun for his slowness, declaring him finished. Se-gun remained silent, his mind racing. He was still human, even as the vampirization progressed. Deokyeon's brutal advice echoed in his thoughts. If killing is required from the start, there's no need to hesitate. He steeled his resolve. He had to kill. Suddenly, Se-gun veered off the main road, leaving Yang Jin behind. The biker leader cursed and gave chase, followed by the rest of his bewildered gang, who couldn't understand why they were ignoring the expressway entrance. One of them called Cheon Young-hoo to report the situation. Young-hoo was furious to learn they were in a race instead of a simple capture. He called them reckless bastards, demanding to know what kind of match they were playing at. The biker tried to explain that Se-gun was more than they could handle. Young-hoo ordered them to catch him immediately, only to be told that they had already lost him. Under a blood-red sky, Se-gun pulled up to an abandoned construction site, the location he had chosen for the final confrontation. He didn't have to wait long. Yang Jin arrived, his headlights cutting through the gloom. He was furious, accusing Se-gun of running away like a coward, questioning his manhood after only a year. Se-gun calmly reminded him of his earlier warning. Before Yang Jin could react, a bullet from Se-gun's Tokarev tore through his neck, sending him and his bike crashing to the ground. Se-gun dismounted, pistol in hand, and stood over his fallen rival. He mused that it wouldn't matter if it were a year or a decade. A guy like him should have known better than to get involved. He asked if the pain was bad and promised to make it comfortable. He pulled out a blood pack and poured its contents into Yang Jin's mouth, telling him he might live if he drank it. The blood coursed through Yang Jin's system. He felt the pain in his neck vanish, replaced by a surge of incredible strength. He also felt an intoxicating aroma fill his senses. With a guttural roar, he lunged at Se-gun, his transformation complete. But he was met with a blinding flash of blue fire. Engulfed in the flames, he screamed in agony, his newly formed vampire body disintegrating into nothingness. He managed one last curse for Se-gun before he was gone, his final question hanging in the air. What had been done to him? Se-gun looked on, his face impassive, the blue flames reflecting in his cold eyes. From a distance, Chen Young-hoo and the remaining bikers waited for the spectacle unfold. They were stunned into silence. Young-hoo stared, his face grim, and stated the obvious. Yang Jin was no longer human. As the sky darkened to a deep crimson, he and his men approached the construction site. He explained to his confused underlings that they had just witnessed a human undergoing vampirization, only to be consumed by some unknown force. He told himself he had no choice. Se-gun's thoughts drifted back to his conversation with Deokyeon, to his own uncertainty about the necessity of killing. He remembered Yang Jin's offer to share a beer, and for a fleeting moment he wondered if there could have been another way. But he pushed the thought aside. It was a situation that required killing. That was all there was to it. Meanwhile, in a stylish downtown bar, a nervous waitress approached a lone customer. The man, a handsome blonde in a tailored suit, told her it was fine to speak Korean, as he could understand everything. She took his order for champagne, but before she could leave, a young boy with blonde hair and glowing blue eyes appeared, calling him master. The boy, Will, looked distressed. He explained that a woman had suddenly passed out just outside. They found her slumped against a red sports car wearing a hospital gown. The man put a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. Later, as they drove across a bridge, Will sat in the passenger seat, the unconscious woman in the back. He asked his master if it was really okay to get involved, suggesting they could just leave her for the police. The man smiled, his fangs glinting. He told his young charge that everything happens for a reason, and he valued that greatly. Will was still uncertain, admitting he sometimes couldn't understand his master's thinking. The man just laughed, remarking that fate rarely makes sense. He was, after all, a romantic. In a lavish penthouse high above the city, Phantom gazed at the sprawling lights below. He swirled the dark red liquid in his glass as his young servant Wilhelm entered the room. The boy, carrying a briefcase, reported that he had left the woman at the Yonsei health system as commanded. Wilhelm then asked why his master was so preoccupied with the girl. Phantom simply smiled, reminding the boy that he was a romantic. With a sigh, Wilhelm sat down, stating that romance would have to wait until after his work was finished. Phantom considered the suggestion before changing the subject, asking if Wilhelm had found out what he needed to know. The boy confirmed he had. He identified the woman as Yun Mi-hei, whose story had recently been in the news. She was no ordinary person. Will explained that she had been assaulted by 6 of her female classmates. The perpetrators were booked without arrest, having claimed their victim was acting haughty. Lounging on the sofa, Phantom idly noted that blood made it difficult to use a phone's touchscreen. Wilhelm interrupted his master's musings, announcing that he had received a video from Sylvester. Phantom's mood soured. He lamented that the hunter was still poking around, remarking on how much Sylvester must truly hate him. Will reminded him that he had not only gotten the man excommunicated from the Vatican, but had also frozen all his accounts. Phantom reluctantly agreed to watch the video, Riley admitting that work came first. The screen flickered to life, showing a bloody scene in a dark alley. A grim figure emerged from the shadows, his piercing blue eyes glowing with cold intent. Grainy security footage captured the moment he cornered his prey. As if narrating a tired old play, Phantom recited the hunter's mantra of ashes to ashes, dust to dust. On screen, a terrified vampire begged for its life, as Sylvester loomed over it. Phantom scoffed at the creature's plea, questioning its right to claim it was a living being while feasting on the blood of others. He challenged the vampire to cry and prove its innocence, but the creature could only tremble in fear as Sylvester's blade pressed against its throat. Phantom declared that this was the vampire's limit, his own fangs glinting in the low light. As Sylvester delivered the final decisive blow, Phantom elegantly spilled his own glass of wine in a parallel motion. The video feed dissolved into static. He stood with Will pouring another glass and declared Sylvester's predictable methods disqualified him as a poet. Meanwhile, in a filthy public restroom, Han Se-gun was retching. For 2 days, he hadn't been able to eat anything. The memory of Yongjin's horrifying death tormented him, forcing him to his knees before the toilet. Deokyeon's cynical words echoed in his mind, questioning his right to judge who deserved to die. Se-gun felt a wave of despair, wondering what other choice he could have possibly made. Later, sitting outside a convenience store, he finally managed to eat some instant noodles. He watched a group of people pass by, absently wondering what they were so busy with. Suddenly, a young woman with pink hair knelt beside him. She asked if anyone ever told him he looked a lot like Kurt Cobain. Se-gun thought to himself, smells like teen spirit? More like smells of instant noodles and regret, but said nothing. He'd been asked many things, but that was a first. Their moment was broken by an angry shout. A group of thugs approached, their leader yelling the girl's name, Jin Yu-mi, and demanding to know why she was ignoring him. The man sneered at Se-gun, asking who the hell he was. Without a word, Se-gun stood and started to walk away. Enraged, the thug grabbed his shoulder, but before he could finish his threat, Se-gun spun and landed a vicious punch, sending the man crashing to the pavement. Jin Yu-mi watched, a captivated smile playing on her lips. Se-gun stood over the fallen thug and offered a cold apology, claiming he thought there was an insect. The thug stared at his blood-soaked hand in disbelief. Se-gun offered a hollow apology, repeating that he had mistaken the man for an insect. Staggering to his feet, the thug spat curses, asking if Se-gun was determined to die. He ordered his crew to follow the hunter, who had already turned his back on them. Se-gun paused under a streetlight. He seemed to contemplate the absurdity of the threat. Could a mere human like this truly kill him? Unfazed by the tension, Jin Yu-mi popped in an earbud. She pulled up a song on her phone, and the raw, gritty sound of Nirvana filled the air. As the music swelled, the thugs charged. The leader threw a wild kick, but Se-gun caught his leg with ease and used his momentum to throw him into a wall. He moved through the others with brutal efficiency, a whirlwind of fists and feet that left bodies scattered across the pavement. One man swung a broken metal frame only to have his arm broken before being kicked away. Suddenly, the leader lunged from behind, plunging a knife deep into Se-gun's back. For a moment, the thug thought he had won, but Se-gun barely flinched. He turned slowly, his eyes devoid of pain, and the leader's face contorted in terror. Se-gun advanced, ignoring the blade as he moved. He disarmed the man with a sickening crack of bone and a swift block, his face twisting into a mask of contempt. He then grabbed the thug's head and, with a look of utter disgust, drove the knife into his throat. Se-gun stood over the gurgling man, his voice a low growl. He reminded the thug of his promise to kill a human. He demanded that he try. He punctuated the command with a vicious kick, grabbing the man by his hair and unleashing a torrent of blows. He screamed at the broken man to fight back, his rage boiling over as he questioned if this was all the thug had. Through it all, Jin Yumi watched, her expression unreadable. The adrenaline finally faded, sweat beading on his forehead. Jin Yumi's calm gaze met his for a second before he swayed, his hand reaching out for support that wasn't there. He collapsed onto the cold pavement, leaving the girl standing alone amidst the carnage. The next morning, sunlight streamed into a quaint cafe named Arjuna. The owner was busy mopping the floor, sighing to herself about needing to hire a part-timer. A sleek black sports car purred to a stop outside, its butterfly doors lifting gracefully. The bell on the door chimed, and she greeted the visitor with a wide smile. It was Sylvester. She called him Sylvie, a nickname he immediately told her not to use. Surprised, she asked why he had returned so much earlier than planned. He stepped inside and replied that it was because he liked Dostoevsky. Seagun awoke to a searing pain in his back. He pushed himself into a sitting position on a blood-stained bed, trying to recall when he had passed out. The room, decorated with rock band posters, was completely unfamiliar. On the floor, he saw Jin Yu-mi and two other girls sleeping amongst the mess. Looking at his wound, he found it crudely patched with what looked suspiciously like toilet paper. Just then, Jin Yu-mi began to stir, asking if he was awake. Seagun moved to get up, but she quickly expressed her concern over his stab wound, asking if he would be okay to leave. As he paused, she crawled onto the bed and made a startling proposition, asking if he wanted to sleep with her. She leaned in close, whispering that he shouldn't hesitate to touch her, adding that she would be okay with it if it was him. Seagun stared blankly for a moment before recoiling, asking if she was crazy or high on glue. The girl's confident demeanor vanished, replaced by a flustered apology. He sighed, feeling a headache coming on. He admitted he was on edge from not having eaten and mumbled an apology for beating up her boyfriends. He turned to go, but she stopped him, asking him to come with her. Their destination was a convenience store where they sat with instant noodles and rice balls. Jin Yumi ate with an impressive fervor, a fact Seagun noted with silent annoyance, considering it was his money paying for the meal. Diagnose. She corrected him, stating the thugs were not her boyfriends. She had only followed him because she was worried he would get lost. He smirked. He wasn't a child. As other people walked past the window, her expression became distant, and he found himself wondering if she was as alone as he was. After starting to eat, she introduced herself with a beaming smile as Jin Yu-mi. He took another bite of noodles and flatly told her he hadn't asked. In a bright, sterile hospital corridor, an enraged man screamed at the staff for allowing his daughter to run away. A nurse pleaded with him to calm down, but he was beyond reason, shouting that his daughter had nearly died on the street and demanding to know who would have taken responsibility. The tirade was interrupted by a smooth voice. Phantom appeared, holding a bouquet of red flowers, and commented that he had arrived at a bad time. The angry father turned on him, but before he could speak, Phantom snapped his fingers. The world dissolved into a psychedelic haze for everyone in the hall, freezing them in place with vacant expressions. From her room, Yeonmi-hae watched silently. Phantom's thoughts drifted to the girl. She had been confined to this hospital for a year, a fragile human, but her escape attempt showed that her spirit was far from broken. He approached her, his voice soft as he apologized for bringing her back to this place. He invited her to come with him. Then his expression turned predatory. He informed her that it wasn't a choice. He was kidnapping her. She simply stared at the flowers he offered. Later, they were driving across a bridge in a vibrant red sports car. Speaking into an earpiece under the alias Mr. Roe Gibson, Phantom ordered women's clothing in various sizes. He chuckled, telling his subordinate on the other end that their sense of humor had improved, joking they should try stand-up comedy. He added that perhaps seeing Will in a dress wouldn't be so bad. In the next instant, his body was thrown forward violently. The bulletproof glass shattered as multiple rounds tore through the car and into his chest. A single curse escaped his lips before he slumped over the wheel, his white coat stained crimson. On a distant rooftop, a sniper's scope was trained on the disabled vehicle. Sylvester lowered his rifle, a grim smile playing on his lips. He wondered aloud if that had been a grand enough greeting for his old enemy. At a high-end hotel, Phantom, now impeccably dressed and operating under his alias, Mr. Roe Gibson, was greeted by his staff. They had prepared everything he asked for. He instructed two of his female employees to help Yeonmi-hae change out of her patient gown, and they led her away. He then handed the flattened bullets he had pulled from his chest to his male subordinate, explaining that Sylvester had fired 6 rounds at them, all aimed at the girl. The subordinate looked horrified, realizing how close they had come to disaster had they been silver bullets. Phantom mused that even if they were normal rounds, the blood splatter alone would have been enough to turn her into a vampire. He smirked, noting that Sylvester had become quite the gentleman. Elsewhere, Seagun sat on a park bench, staring at his battered motorcycle. The bike had reached its limit. It was a miracle it still ran at all. He knew it was greedy to expect it to be fine after everything he had put it through. He wished he could repair it or even sell it for a new one. but a glance into his empty wallet confirmed he had no money. He cursed the old man who refused to trade with him because he was a minor, knowing he needed to sell the vampire blood he'd collected. He sighed, wondering how he would find a dealer willing to buy from a kid. Suddenly, Jin Yumi appeared, her face lighting up as she called out to him. He looked up to find her leaning over him on the bench. She plopped down beside him, complaining that her legs hurt. She then asked where they were going next, much to his confusion. He told her it was late and that she should go home, asking where she lived and where her friends were. She explained that her friends had all left to meet their boyfriends or go home. He told her she should do the same, warning her that her parents would be worried. Her cheerful facade crumbled as she quietly admitted she was an orphan. The revelation hit Segun with unexpected force. After a moment of silence, he offered her a ride. They rode through the city streets in silence, the wind whipping through her hair. Segun's mind pieced together the fragments of her story. She was a delinquent, as evidenced by the photos on her phone, with an abusive father. She had wished for death, believing there was no point in living such a miserable life. She had refused to be treated like an object. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, her wish came true with the death of her parents, leaving her kneeling alone at their funeral. She had been lost ever since, trapped in a cycle of self-destruction. He knew he couldn't save her, comfort her, or take responsibility for her life. Yet her disjointed story made a strange kind of sense to him. He thought, misery loves company, and were both charter members of the club. He understood because they were so similar. The memory of her desperate proposition flashed in his mind, and he cursed under his breath. He accelerated suddenly, and they arrived at her home a few minutes later. He told her to go inside. As he turned to leave, she asked where he was going, and he simply replied that he was going home. She called out to him, her voice laced with uncertainty, asking if they would ever see each other again. He paused. If she was fine with fast food, he supposed they could have breakfast together again sometime. With that, he rode off into the night. He cursed the bike again, knowing it was a liability. He needed to find a way to make money, and fast. His eyes hardened with resolve. He drove to the Arjuna Cafe, the bell chiming as he entered. His eyes widened in shock. Standing there looking just as surprised to see him was Sylvester. Segun arrived at the Arjuna Cafe late at night. Inside, he found Sylvester sitting at a table with Jung Jun. He asked when the hunter had returned to Korea, and Sylvester replied that it hadn't been long. Segun looked over the documents on the table, wondering why there was so much paperwork involved in their line of work. Sylvester slid a clipboard toward him. His gaze was like ice as he remarked that Segun had grown arrogant in his absence, or perhaps he had simply decided he wanted to die. Sylvester asked if he knew someone suitable for a new partnership. Segun slammed his fist on the table, declaring that his new partner was an uncontrollable rookie. Meanwhile, in a rain-slicked back alley sneered that the kid from Phantasmagoria had come to their territory, Will faced a group of vampires. Their leader, a brutish-looking man named Zhang. He commented that Will looked quite human. Another vampire chimed in, calling Will a puppy who didn't know his place, and warning him not to speak so lightly of their new alliance with gangsters. Will's eyes glowed as he retorted that at least he had a master to serve, unlike the now leaderless Jukyo clan. One of Chiyoung's underlings exploded in anger, claiming a true demon hunter had cowardly interfered in their master's fight. Chiyoung silenced him and told Will to get to the point. Will kicked a briefcase across the room, stating that the hunter who killed their master was still at large. The contents of the briefcase were hardly enough to fund a proper war against such a foe. He clarified that the money wasn't for their revenge, especially since his own master wasn't even in the country. Chiyoung asked why he had come. Will replied that he was after someone much weaker. He tossed a photo onto the table. It was a picture of Segun, Sylvester's disciple. He told them the boy was in Gwanat-gu, Seoul, and that they should be able to handle him. Jiyoung grumbled about the lousy employer, but Will reminded him that he had to earn his money. Cheon Young-hoo, who was also present, stared at the photo in disbelief. When Jiyoung asked if he knew the boy, he confirmed that it was the same high schooler who had wrecked his club. Will noted that it seemed they would get the job done quickly. Young agreed, a hungry smile spreading across his face as he promised to deliver. Back in Phantom's penthouse, he and Yoonmi Hae stood by the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. She asked if he was rich, and he admitted he was wealthy enough not to deny it. She then asked why he was so interested in her. He considered the question, suggesting it might be a sentiment for his own kind. She pressed further, asking if he would really grant her any wish. He replied that he would, if it was possible. She looked out at the rain and said she wanted to go where they were. Phantom understood immediately. She wanted to haunt them. He explained that for beings who live an eternal life, there is a sound that begins to echo in their minds, a voice that incites destruction and death. It was a chronic illness that came with their immortal bodies, but he valued patience more than pleasure. She questioned his meaning, and he explained that patience was the power to endure, and that if one had something to protect, even hell could be sweet. She asked if he really believed that. He admitted he didn't plan to force his values on her, but that there were certainly good things to be found in life. She questioned if he had ever found any. He was silent for a moment before looking at her. He told her she was lying. He confessed that there were days when he believed the lie and that much was true. She remained unconvinced, stating that it still didn't matter. He knew then that she had no attachment to life. He thought to himself that for the child who would become the youngest of his kin, revenge would be a fine gift. He turned to her and pulled her into an embrace. Just then, Will burst into the room, his face a mask of panic. He cried out to his master as Phantom held the girl close, making her drink from his blood. He had made his choice. He looked at Will, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light, and told the boy to come to him before he changed his mind. The night was awash with rain. Seagun carved through the downpour on his motorcycle with cold resolve. Back in the cafe, the tension remained thick. He stood before Sylvester, silently judging the man he saw as a despicable, power-corrupted hypocrite. He couldn't reconcile the man's arrogance with his supposed mission to save humanity, wondering if Sylvester truly saw himself as a god. Breaking the silence, Seagun challenged him, asking what a priest planned to do about Phantom. Sylvester's gaze was sharp. With eyes glowing faintly, he raised his hand, formed a finger gun, and mouthed a single silent word. Bang. Seagun was momentarily stunned into silence, before turning to leave the cafe without another word. As he walked away, Sylvester called out his name. Seagun stopped, and a small glowing pill was tossed his way. It was the psychedelic moon. Sylvester informed him that his target was the source of the hatred felt by the woman Phantom had taken. He warned his student to think carefully and not act like an idiot. With his mission set, Seagun hit the road again as he accelerated into the night. A familiar red glow emanated from his chest, his body surging with power. Suddenly, a grotesque bat-like creature swooped overhead. He glanced up, unfazed, just as a monstrous hound with glowing red eyes lunged from the side. He twisted the handlebar sharply, the monstrous beast snapping at his heels. He swerved his bike hard, narrowly avoiding the creature's attack. Ahead, figures stood waiting in the rain. One of the vampires, a woman with long hair, recognized him as the target Young had mentioned. The other, a larger, more brutish vampire, confirmed his identity with a menacing stare. Seagun found himself surrounded on the slick road. He brought his bike to a stop, facing his ambushers. The slender vampire mockingly questioned how he had acquired guns, noting their illegality in Korea. In response, Seagun revved his engine, launching his bike at the vampire, who shockingly stopped the front wheel with a single hand. But Seagun was faster. A gunshot rang out from his own weapon, the vampire recoiling in surprise at the sudden counterattack. Using the momentum, Seagun vaulted himself and his bike over the enemy, leaving the larger vampire to watch the spectacle. He landed perfectly on the wet pavement, a blur of motion, his eyes glowing with intensity. The slender vampire clutched a fresh wound on her cheek, cursing. His larger companion remarked that the kid was pretty good. The wounded vampire snapped back, but his partner simply thought it was a classic case of a skill issue. Seagun stood ready, dual-wielding his pistols. He quickly calculated that his remaining ammunition wouldn't be enough to secure a victory. Deciding to end the game, the slender vampire let her true power erupt, monstrous tendrils sprouting from her back. He suggested they replenish all the blood that had been spilled. Seagun gritted his teeth, his expression hardening. He charged forward, screaming at the bastards to get out of his way, his guns blazing at a new swarm of winged creatures descending. Seagun unleashed a torrent of fire as the vampires weaved through the bullets with unnatural speed. The larger vampire scoffed, claiming that silver-treated Tokarev rounds wouldn't even scratch him. A flurry of shadowy tendrils forced Seagun back, but his eyes remained locked on his targets, desperately trying to track their movements. The two vampires closed in, flanking him. The larger one cut him off, questioning where he thought he was going. Seagun slid across the wet asphalt, twisting his body to fire upward in a fluid motion. He squeezed the trigger, aiming at the monster looming over him. The shot forced the vampire back a step, but the other moved in immediately, its crimson eyes glowing in the dark. They struck as one. Before he could react, shadowy tendrils shot out, wrapping around his arm and crushing his grip. He grunted in pain as he was violently flung into the air and slammed onto the road. The vampire's gaze was utterly devoid of emotion as it pinned him to the ground. It wondered aloud how long he planned to keep fooling around, lifting him effortlessly before sneering that his resistance was pointless. Seagun was smashed into the pavement again, leaving him stunned and gasping in the rain. The two figures stood over him, victorious. The slender vampire clicked its tongue in annoyance, then smiled with sadistic glee, deciding it was finally time to eat. Suddenly, a clean shot rang out, and the slender vampire's head exploded in a spray of blood. The larger one roared, whipping his head around and demanding to know who was there. From the shadows, a suppressed pistol emerged, held by Seagun's former mentor, Deokyeon. He called Seagun a crazy bastard, angrily asking if taking on a vampire without the drug was what he had taught him. Apparently, his detailed PowerPoint presentations on hunter safety had been ignored. The remaining vampire spotted the newcomer. Deokyeon's eyes glowed with cold focus as he met the creature's charge with twin blades. The vampire howled as Deokyeon unloaded a shotgun at point-blank range, the blast echoing through the night. The creature was thrown back against the guardrail, clutching its mangled chest. It snarled in agony before vaulting over the railing and escaping into the darkness. Deokyeon watched him go, his expression grim. With one vampire dead on the pavement, Deokyeon informed Sigun he was going after the bastard who ran. He ordered his former student to drain blood from the corpse and then get to the goalpost. With that, he leaped into the forest in pursuit. Sigun slowly got to his feet and began the grim task of collecting a blood sample. He noted the blood felt different, potent, realizing these were the kin of a true demon. That explained their immense strength. He then picked up the swords Deokyeon had left behind. His mind drifted to a rain-soaked city street from his past. He saw the body of a man with a bandaged face lying among other corpses. It was the aftermath of a massacre he had committed, a necessary evil leading him to his true target. He reminded himself that he too had weapons, and that he had trained for this. Taking a dose of psychedelic moon, his world erupted into a cascade of surreal colors. His eyes glowed with renewed power. This time would be different. Through a distorted neon lens, he walked through the warped reflection of the city, each step deliberate. He strode through the puddles and into a building littered with the dead. There, he found her, his target. He stood over her body, recalling the strange feeling that, despite everything, he had wished she wasn't dead. Her bloody hand was still, her lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling. A memory surfaced of a small, innocent girl standing in the same room, looking at the carnage. He dropped the sword, his resolve hardening. Sylvester's words about death being a return to Eden echoed in his mind. He already knew how this was destined to end. With tears streaming down his face, he remembered uttering the final rites before a single shot ended the child's suffering. The vampire Gyung stumbled through an alley, clutching his chest and cursing his wounds. He was soon cornered by Sylvester, who appeared before him like a phantom in the rain. Gyung lunged, only to be met by a blinding series of slashes from Sylvester's glowing blade, his body ripped apart in an instant. Deokyeon arrived at the scene, finding Sylvester standing over the mangled remains. He complained that Sylvester had left nothing behind to draw blood from. Sylvester, uninterested in small talk, ordered Deokyeon to bring Segun back. When questioned, he explained that too many eyes were on him now. Deokyeon grimaced, wondering if he meant Tetra Annex. As if on cue, the building behind them erupted in flames, a massive explosion rocking the street. Deokyeon hurried to his car and drove toward the inferno, pulling up just as Segun emerged from the building. Deokyeon asked if he was okay. Segun, looking exhausted, simply asked for a ride. Sirens wailed as fire trucks sped past, racing toward the blaze. Firefighters rushed into the chaos as the building was consumed by fire. From a distant rooftop, Sylvester watched the scene unfold. He stood alone in the rain, joined only by a flock of pigeons and a clouder of stray cats. He commanded one of the cats to puke, and it coughed up the bullet casings he had fired earlier. His animal spies had served their purpose. Meanwhile, in front of the Arjuna Cafe, a sleek black sports car pulled up, followed closely by a red one. The two vehicles parked on the quiet street. Inside the cafe, Phantom sat across from Sylvester. Sylvester was surprised Phantom had come in person after avoiding him for so long. Phantom apologized for his tardiness and then cheekily suggested Sylvester find another true demon to bother, as he wasn't the type to shed tears. Sylvester cut straight to the point, demanding to know why Phantom was there. The Vampire King gestured casually, suggesting they talk since they had an eternity ahead of them. Sylvester dismissed the notion of eternity, calling him a rat who stole time from humans. He demanded Phantom state his true purpose. Phantom calmly sipped his coffee, then warned Sylvester not to get on Tetra Annax's bad side. Sylvester scoffed at the idea of a vampire worrying about a hunter, thanking him sarcastically for the concern. Phantom clarified it was a concern, not a worry, and Sylvester countered by asking what would happen if he chose not to behave. He placed his gun on the table, asking if they were going to settle things with force. Sylvester stated he had no problem with that, a silent challenge passing between them. Phantom explained that his position had evolved from the days when savagery was law. Dealing with Sylvester in such a barbaric way would go against his aesthetics. He declared himself the king of both vampires and humans, adding that today was a special day to bestow the gift of revenge upon the youngest of his bloodline. He then rose from his seat, asking Sylvester not to make him too angry, calling him a stalker bastard. With his points made, he saw himself out, thanking Sylvester for the coffee on his way out the door. Alone, again, Sylvester mused that sending Deokyeon after Segun out of concern was pathetic. He met the two hunters at a rain-soaked park, immediately chiding Segun for not even bothering to collect his empty cartridges. Segun remained silent, Sylvester observed that things hadn't gone the way Seagun wanted. Sylvester finally spoke, asking Sylvester an odd question. Did he resemble Kurt Cobain? Sylvester replied that he must have a headache to be spouting such nonsense. Seagun clutched his head in his hands, the weight of his actions and memories pressing down on him as he sat hunched over on the bench. The three hunters shared a quiet, somber moment in the rain as the Crimson Witch arc came to a close. Elsewhere in the city, a terrified man was cornered in an alley, his fate sealed by the monstrous shadow of a mad dog looming over him. In an alley behind a PC Bang, a group of employees complained about their boss getting them too much work. One grumbled that they couldn't even report him to the Ministry of Employment and Labor, while another defended the boss for at least paying their salary. Their conversation was cut short by a strange crunching sound echoing from deeper in the alley. They peered into the darkness, wondering if it was a homeless person eating something. The sound came again as a monstrous horned creature revealed itself, feasting on a corpse. The men froze, questioning if they could possibly take it on. The creature, a twisted mass of black sinew and bone with glowing red eyes, turned its skeletal face toward them and let out a guttural hiss. One of the men fumbled with his phone, trying to take a picture of the monster. Before he could, the creature was on them in a flash, tearing through the group in a spray of blood. It crushed one man's head in its hand while the others watched in horror. The screams were cut short as the beast devoured him. The two remaining men watched as the creature seemed to grow larger, its form swelling with each kill. The monster, once a human, was now driven by an insatiable hunger. His humanity had become a distant memory, lost to the moment he awoke to find himself feasting on corpses. He couldn't stop wondering if people had always tasted this delicious. The next night, at a quiet park, a man was out for being fat. Suddenly, a manhole cover burst open behind him. He turned in terror just as a gaunt, skull-faced creature leaped from the sewer and landed before him. The creature, dubbed the Mad Dog, lunged forward, driven by a singular, overwhelming thought: hunger. It pounced on the man. The brutal attack caught on a nearby security camera. From a window across the street, a resident snapped a photo just as the creature's rampage began, the flash illuminating the window for a moment. The Mad Dog tore through the park, its killing spree a blur of violence. It left a trail of bodies in its wake, its hunger still not satisfied. The following morning, at a remote warehouse, Daeokyeon met with an older, eccentric-looking man who worked as a hunter supplier. The man teased Daeokyeon, thinking he had quit, but clarified that he needed hunters like him and Jung-Joon to bring in items for him to work on. Daeokyeon remained silent. The supplier flipped a switch, and the warehouse lights flickered on. Amidst shelves of high-tech equipment, a small television played the news. Daeokyeon handed over a bag filled with blood packs as the report detailed the massacre at the park. The police attributed the killings to a drunkard, but eyewitnesses insisted the attacker was not a person. They described a monster that couldn't possibly be human, questioning what kind of drunk could rip someone in half. Daeokyeon realized the creature was a vampire that had lost its mind to bloodlust. He knew that both hunters and vampires had an unspoken rule to live in the darkness, but this public massacre had shattered it. The supplier predicted that other vampires would crawl out of the woodwork to deal with the problem, and opportunistic hunters would rush in to score big. Daeokyeon agreed, knowing a shit show was about to begin. That night, the park was cordoned off with police tape, the scene of the massacre now eerily quiet. The Mad Dog was back, lurking near the vending machines and feasting on another victim. Suddenly, a white projectile shot through the air and struck the creature, embedding itself in its chest. The Mad Dog stumbled back, wounded. A group of men emerged from the shadows, one of them, a vampire with a tiger print shirt, telling the monster to quiet down before it woke everyone up. Under the pale moonlight, the park was quiet. Two vampires from the Jukyo clan approached the Mad Dog as it fed near the vending machines. The creature growled, its face a mangled mess of bone and flesh. Young ordered Yu-Hu to step aside. Yu-Hu complied, flexing his hands as sharp claws extended from his fingertips, ready for a fight. He told the Mad Dog to bring it on. The corrupted creature charged, leaping at the smaller vampire. Yu-Hu met the attack head-on, his claws tearing into the monster's flesh. The Mad Dog swiped back, but Yu-Hu dodged and landed a powerful blow to its side. He paused, assessing the damage, just as the Mad Dog grabbed him by the hand. It slammed him into the ground with incredible force, its skeletal face looming over him. Before it could finish him off, Gyeong intervened, his hand transforming into a grotesque, clawed weapon. He fired a blast of energy that sent the Mad Dog flying, leaving it twitching on the ground amidst the carnage. Yu-Hu insisted he could have handled it himself, but Gyeong warned him not to let his guard down. Gyeong then made a classic bad guy monologue mistake, joking that this is usually where people slip up in manhwas, which of course, Yu-Hu begged him not to jinx. Just as he was boasting that it wouldn't happen to him, his head was blown clean off his shoulders. Gyeong watched in shock as the Mad Dog, now wielding a shotgun, opened fire, forcing him to dodge a barrage of bullets. He cursed the crazy bastard as police sirens wailed in the distance, their flashing lights illuminating the chaotic scene. Jeong's face twisted in rage, and he let out a furious roar, vowing to kill the creature with his own hands. As the police arrived, they found Yuhu's headless body and the mad dog standing over another victim. Gyeong was gone. Back at the Arjuna Cafe, Sylvie greeted Segun, noticing his new motorcycle parked outside. Segun explained he'd found a dealer willing to trade with a minor. Sylvie complimented his new outfit, remarking that he was finally starting to look like a hunter. Segun asked where Sylvester was, and Sylvie told him he was sleeping upstairs. He found Sylvester in his room, doing one-handed push-ups in bunny print pajamas with a gun in his hand. Segun stood awkwardly in the doorway, and Sylvester greeted him dryly. He warned Segun not to make a habit of barging in on him, but Segun retorted that the pajamas weren't very persuasive. Segun got straight to the point, bringing up the recent incident at the park. Sylvester confirmed he was talking about the monster, musing that Korea's vampire clan still hadn't properly established control over the criminal underworld. He dismissed the creature as a mere corrupted that would die on its own, but Segun argued that people were dying in the meantime. Sylvester shot back that he wasn't his private tutor and didn't owe him any answers. He then asked what value the creature held for him. Sylvester knew something bigger was going on. Sylvester sighed, admitting that a corrupted's blood was worthless, but they attracted executioners. He explained that corrupted, lost to their hunger, don't bother hiding their existence. This forces the other vampires to send out their enforcers to protect their clan, drawing out high-level vampires who are normally impossible to track. Segun realized Sylvester was using the corrupted as bait. Sylvester confirmed it, adding that it was a good deal for hunters who worked for money. He then opened an app on his phone, called Vamplic Finder, a dark web-style information network for hunters. Segun asked what it was, and Sylvester told him to be quiet. An announcement played from the phone, explaining that the news making headlines was about the corrupted roaming soul. The voice then revealed that the corrupted had been confirmed to be the former hunter, Jung Jun. Sylvester's expression darkened as he realized this would be a rough one for Daeokyeon, who was shown driving down a highway, his face grim.